"You're such a slob. There's no way you're my kid. Get lost, you pig," yelled Bob, and I stepped in to protect Luke. "If you won't acknowledge Luke as your own son, I'll take him in." Days later, when the two found out that Luke had been on TV, they came to our house. "Luke, come home with us," they implored. To them, Luke retorted, "Who are you guys?" "I'm Katherine Johnson. Ever since I lost my husband a few years ago, I've been living alone. Living alone in a big house was lonesome. Having no particular hobbies, every day was unbearably dull. However, there was one thing I looked forward to. That was seeing my grandson, Luke. Seeing my adorable grandson, Luke, was the only thing that brought me comfort. My son Bob and his wife Michelle ran a nightclub together. It seemed to be flourishing, and the couple always seems busy. The two had a baby after several years of marriage. Apparently, they wanted to have a girl and make her the star attraction of their club. Even before the baby's gender was known, they bought tons of baby girl products, holding high hopes for a girl. However, the baby turned out to be a boy. The disappointment of the two upon knowing that it was a boy was profound. Once the baby is born, you'd think they find it endearing regardless. That's what I optimistically thought, but it didn't go that way. Bob and Michelle showed no interest in the baby they had brought into the world, nor did they seem to care much for him. Even his name wasn't given much thought by the two. Fed up, I presented a few options, and from those, the couple chose the name Luke. The couple continued to show little interest in Luke. The two were determined to have a girl next time, but they never had another child. Michelle gradually began to harbor resentment towards Luke. "All our plans got messed up because you are not a girl. It's all your fault." Michelle seemed to have such misplaced hatred towards him. Moreover, led by Michelle, Bob too began to adopt a cold attitude toward Luke. If only I had intervened at that point, maybe things wouldn't have turned out this way. Eventually, Michelle stopped making meals for Luke. She'd leave a $5 bill on the table every day before heading to work, not returning until the early hours of the morning. Luke spent the long hours from evening to night alone. Just imagine how daunting it must have been for a young child to wait alone for his parents' return. With the money Michelle left, Luke had been buying his meals at the convenience store. Still a young boy, Luke didn't consider things like nutritional balance and would often buy sweets and potato chips to eat. Furthermore, there were times when he would eat convenience store meals that were about to be discarded. A child going to the convenience store alone daily is inevitably noticeable. A sympathetic convenience store worker would secretly share some food with Luke. Thanks to this, even on days when Michelle didn't leave money, Luke was never without a meal. By the time Luke was in 3rd grade, his weight had exceeded 150 pounds. This was the result of his unhealthy diet of sweetbread, convenience store meals, and sweets every day. Bob and Michelle seemed displeased with this. Ever since Luke had put on weight, the two had been verbally abusive towards him. "Look at how fat you've gotten. Get a grip. You're not my child, you're just a fat burden. Get out, you're in the way." When I learned that they had said such things, it felt like my heart would burst. I wonder how Luke felt hearing such words from his father. Worried about Luke, I occasionally visited his house to check on him. From Bob and Michelle's tone, I had a hunch they were starting to resent Luke. I visited their home to confirm that they weren't doing anything terrible to Luke. One day, sadly, my fears came true. "There's no way a fatso like you could be my child. Get lost, you pig." As soon as I opened the door, I heard Bob shouting. I rushed towards the noise and saw Luke lying on the floor. Judging from his hand on his cheek, Bob must have hit him. "Bob, what are you doing?" I rushed over to Luke, pulling him towards me to shield him from Bob. Looking at Luke, he gazed back at me with a vacant expression. His look resembled that of surrender, and I regretted making such a young boy wear such a face. Bob seemed unaware of my arrival, his eyes wide as if they were about to pop out. Do you understand what you're saying? Luke is genuinely your child, I yelled at Bob. Although Bob is my son I gave birth to, I couldn't comprehend what he is thinking at all. Even if Luke was not the daughter he had hoped for, I could not believe the treatment he was giving to his own innocent son. If you don't acknowledge Luke as your child, I'll take him in. Both Luke and Bob were taken aback by my sudden words. From there, the conversation moved rapidly. Bob and Michelle, seizing the opportunity to rid themselves of their problem, accepted my proposal eagerly. Thanks, Mom. Now I can concentrate on my business, right, Michelle? Yes, thank you so much. On the day I took Luke in, the two of them said this with the brightest smiles I had ever seen. That smile made me sad. I fully understood how little they cared about Luke. I had been observing, thinking that it would be best for Luke that he was with his real parents, but I strongly regretted not taking him in earlier. On our way back to my house, Luke said, I'm sorry, I'll grow up fast and move out. What on earth was he saying? When I asked him, Luke replied with a stoic expression. You regret taking me in on a whim, don't you? You look angry all along. I look angry? Luke nodded sadly. No, I regret not doing this sooner. I should have let go of my notion sooner that you must be happier to be with your real parents. Aren't you annoyed with me? Luke looked at me with anxious eyes. I tightly hugged Luke. No way! I know for sure that I love you more than those two. Luke seemed uncertain of how to react. He was freezing like a statue for a while, and then he mumbled softly, This is the first time I've been hugged. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I swore to myself that I'd make this kid happy no matter what. From that day on, Luke transformed into a lively and cheerful kid. He started laughing more than I could have ever imagined, and he also became more talkative. Every day when he returned home from school, he would help prepare dinner while excitedly sharing the day's events. You seem very cheerful today, Luke. Did something good happen? Do you know? Something funny happened today. While we were singing in music class, a sparrow flew into the room. The teacher was in such a frenzy. I was wondering why, and then she almost started crying, saying, I can't handle birds. Remembering the event, Luke chuckled. He looked so cute and lovable that my heart melted. Since he started eating healthy meals at my place, Luke's physique became more standard. Although he maintained his childlike charm, his contour sharpened, making him look quite handsome. He shyly told me that the girls at school started talking to him more. Luke seemed happy every day, and I was relieved to see him that way. The day of the first parent-teacher conference since I took Luke in came. Luke's homeroom teacher made a suggestion. Why don't you have him take an IQ test at the hospital? This suggestion made me anxious. I felt like they were saying there was something wrong with Luke's intelligence. Is Luke falling behind the others? As I asked this, the teacher hurriedly waved his hands. No, it's the opposite. From my experience, I believe Luke may be gifted. I was a bit puzzled by the unfamiliar term gifted. According to the teacher, gifted refers to children who possess innately higher abilities compared to their peers. The teacher handed me a piece of paper. This is a graph showing the change in Luke's grades. At a certain point, Luke's grades have shot up significantly. Sure enough, the graph showed a sudden upward trend. Looking at the dates written on the x-axis, I realized that the change happened right after I took Luke in. I was surprised at how sudden it was, so I asked Luke, have you started going to cram a school or something? This increase is unusual though, but that wasn't it. Apparently, Luke had been adjusting his results to avoid doing too well. I didn't quite understand what the teacher meant, so I turned to look at Luke, who was sitting next to me. Noticing my gaze, Luke began to speak. At my old home, if they found out I was doing well in school, they didn't like it. They'd say I was being cheeky and I'd get hit more than usual. Luke shrugged his shoulders. So, during tests, I would intentionally leave answers blank or get them wrong.
I actually knew all the answers, though.
Luke smiled smugly.
Now there's no need for that, so I just take the test normally. It's so easy it's boring. Even just reading the textbooks lets me understand everything in class, which isn't fun. I want to study something more challenging.
Luke sighed deeply. I was momentarily worried that the teacher might feel offended by his words, but my worries were eased when I heard the teacher laughing loudly. What do you think? If Luke is gifted, we might be able to provide support that suits him. Why not get tested at the hospital? If it's for Luke's benefit. With that in mind, I decided to take Luke to the hospital over the weekend. From what I can tell, based on his behavior at school and home, as well as the results of his IQ test, it seems that Luke may be gifted. The doctor spoke clearly. Luke's IQ was significantly higher than average, which surprised me. I had no idea Luke was this smart. No wonder he finds school so easy. To fulfill Luke's desire for more challenging studies, I decided to hire a private tutor for him. The tutor is a veteran who graduated from a prestigious American university, and he understands Luke's characteristics. Luke was pleased, saying it was more fun than school. He passed both the English and Chinese proficiency tests with the highest grade at the tutor's suggestion. When the tutor posted about his proud student on social media, it spread rapidly. Luke became the talk of the town, and we started getting interviews from newspapers and television stations. One day, while spending the usual time with Luke, the doorbell rang. Oh, are the reporters here already? There was still about 30 minutes left until the interview time. I opened the door expecting the reporters and was surprised. Long time no see, Mom. I've come to get Luke. There they were, Bob and Michelle. What brings you here? When I asked, Michelle flashed a bright smile and replied, Dear mother-in-law, thank you for caring for Luke until now. From now on, he will live with us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What on earth is this woman talking about? You must be joking. Luke has an interview soon. I'm very busy. Please leave. Upon hearing the word interview, Bob and Michelle's eyes lit up. So it really was Luke. We saw it on TV. Our son is truly remarkable. Their faces turned towards each other, excitement bubbling between them. And then they blurted out an outrageous idea. If Luke comes back, our shop will be secure. Beside Bob, Michelle was nodding fervently. If we get customers who come to see Luke, our sales will go up. In the long run, we could even leave the management to him. That would make life easier for us. I was astounded at the self-serving thoughts of the two. After claiming that Luke isn't their child, they show up to take him back when they realize how talented he is. A child is, Luke is, not a possession of his parents. Don't you understand? I had reached the limit of my patience. Just as I was gearing up to give them a piece of my mind, Luke appeared behind me. Seeing Luke, Bob and Michelle broke into smiles. Their smiles only stoked my irritation. However, their smiles were shattered by a single phrase from Luke. Who are you guys? Luke asked, staring at the two straight on. They looked bewildered. Who are we? We're your dad and mom. You're our beloved child who I suffered to give birth to. Michelle's words made me feel sick. How dare she call him her beloved child? Just as I was about to retort, Luke smirked and said,
My only family here is my grandmother. I don't know you people who abandoned me.
He stated this firmly. Luke, that woman is your grandmother, not your mother. Come back home with us. Bob tried to persuade him gently, but Luke glared at him.
My home is here with my grandma. Unlike you, she's always shown me love. You abandoned me, and now you want to reclaim me because you think I'm useful? You're not my parents.
It was the first time Luke had ever raised his voice like that. Bob and Michelle cringed at his outburst. Bob, visibly irritated, tried to grab Luke's arm. Just as I was about to intervene, a voice called out from behind Bob. Is what he said true? Did you abandon him? Journalists began to gather around, their faces solemn. They had come to interview Luke. It was already the time of our appointment with them. Reporters surrounded Bob and Michelle. They circled Bob and Michelle, firing off questions at them. Later, this interview was broadcast on television with the sensational title, "The Sad Past of a Genius Boy, Confronting the Parents Who Abandoned Him." The impact was immense. The couple was lambasted on social media, and their business received numerous angry calls. "How could you abandon him just because he wasn't a girl? Don't try to manipulate your child for your own convenience." On top of the angry calls, crowds of people apparently gathered to see the faces of these terrible parents. Needless to say, business could not operate normally under these conditions. In desperation, Michelle reached out to her parents for help, only to receive a cold response. "You reap what you sow. Deal with it yourself. We have no intention of helping anyone who would abandon their child." Bob and Michelle were universally scorned and abandoned. The two of them were reportedly upset, crying out, "Why is this happening to us?" Hopefully this incident will be a wake-up call for them. Although, given their current attitude, the prospects seem bleak. After that incident, Luke and I quickly moved away.
I want to cut ties with them. I can't stand going through this over and over.
I respected his decision, and we moved far away to prevent the two of them from ever approaching Luke again. We would have sought legal measures if we could, but it seems it's hard to sever ties with biological parents, even if they are adoptive. In Luke's new school, he made a good friend, who seemed to understand him well. Luke would bring him home, show him his homemade programming, and happily explain his points of interest. While I find Luke's interests a bit hard to follow, his friend seems to understand, listening attentively and nodding as Luke explains. From time to time, they would be engrossed in a discussion about programming. Seeing Luke so happy always made me feel glad we moved here. Thanks to his new friend, Luke has been able to live freely and happily every day. I hope they continue to get along well and support each other.
Everyone has one or two secrets they'd rather keep hidden. I'm no exception. Back in the day, I was quite a wild child, although now I've become a demure and unassuming woman. Losing my parents at 15, I quickly went astray and joined a gang of troublemakers. I gathered some of the girls from the gang and formed a ladies' group. Thanks to being forced to learn wrestling by my dad since childhood, I was known locally for my overwhelming strength, surpassing even the boys. My life in that world came to an end after meeting a certain person. But living such a life, it seems you inevitably accumulate some lingering issues. My name is Nancy. Now 35, I live as an ordinary housewife, working at a local supermarket. With my light makeup and quiet demeanor, no one would guess that I once wore flashy makeup and rode around on motorcycles. Yes, I was a member of a delinquent group and the leader of a ladies' gang. But then I met my husband, Joshua, and everything changed. It all started 10 years ago, during a clash with a rival gang, when Joshua unexpectedly intervened. That gang used to start fights at every gathering. One day, a particularly fierce brawl broke out. Joshua joined in to save his brother, a member of the rival gang. As members of both groups were falling, Joshua and I were the last ones standing. I even remember Joshua laughing at his mistake, realizing his brother wasn't even there. His dignified appearance somehow struck me, and I found myself speaking to him. "Hey, you're pretty cool." "Me? Really? Looking like this? You must have some strange tastes." "Were you calling out for someone named Noah? Did you find him?" "No. It turns out my brother wasn't here." That's how our slow, private conversation began. Joshua's brother, it seems, was an irredeemable delinquent. Joshua had even taken up boxing, trying to reform him. Joshua himself admitted he couldn't stand to ignore wrongdoing. He struck me as a man brimming with a sense of justice. Through our conversation, we grew close. Over time, we met more often, and it became clear that we had feelings for each other. But back then, Joshua despised delinquents. Despite our mutual attraction, my involvement in the delinquent world prevented our relationship from progressing. Finally, Joshua said that if I left the gang for good, he'd want to be with me. Tired of the senseless fights, I took the opportunity to leave the group. We started dating and got married 5 years later. The group I was part of got disbanded by a rival faction 2 years after I left. After marrying Joshua, I completely transformed into a calm and graceful woman. But recently, our peaceful life was threatened by a certain neighbor, Joshua's sister, Sonia, and her husband. One day, as I was about to see Joshua off to work, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? I'll check. The next moment, Joshua looked surprised. Sonia? He mentioned his sister, whom I knew. I had met her once at a family dinner. Hey Joshua, we've moved next door, starting today. Please take care of us. Hello, I'm Tony, Sonia's husband. Well, looking forward to your cooperation. You are? The two of them started off with a disrespectful attitude. But since one was Joshua's sister, I couldn't be too confrontational. We get along well with the in-laws, so I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. And it turns out Tony was the person who lured Joshua's brother, Noah, into the delinquent world. They both went to the same high school and were a year junior to Joshua. Joshua turned 34 this year, so they must be 33. Sonia, 3 years younger than Joshua, should be 31. Joshua, too bad about your brother, huh? Tony, I don't care about Noah anymore. Even you? Joshua was visibly angry. His brother had passed away due to a fight. Joshua's brother and sister apparently never got along well. Sonia felt neglected in favor of her brother and developed a rivalry, which eventually extended to Joshua as well. Joshua once mentioned how difficult it was to deal with his sister, preferring to dote only on his brother. And like me, Sonia was also a former member of a delinquent group. Unlike her voluntary involvement, Noah was forcibly recruited by Tony. Seeing his siblings' transformation, Joshua probably grew even stronger in his sense of justice. As the three glared at each other, I spoke up from behind Joshua. Joshua, you need to leave for work soon. Ah, right. Running away, Joshua? Remember, I haven't forgotten that you laid hands on me. That was because you attacked Noah. All right, both of you, enough. We're done here. With Sonia's words, Joshua left for work, still unresolved. And at the same time, the bell tolling the start of Sonia and her husband's harassment began. An hour after Joshua left for work, the doorbell rang. But when I checked, no one was there. An hour later, there was a loud noise at the entrance, as if something was violently placed there. When I looked, there was a heap of cardboard boxes dumped in front of the door. What's this about? No one was around, so I decided to ignore it and went back inside. Then I heard a small popping sound from the balcony. I hurried over and found 3 broken eggs scattered. We live in an apartment, on the corner, next to the room Sonia just moved into. This means the harassment likely came from Sonia's room, as there are no neighbors on one side and it's too high for someone from below. Angry, I confronted my next-door neighbors. Hey, is that you? What do you want showing up like this? Sonia greeted me with an irritable demeanor. Is this your idea of a prank? Throwing eggs on our balcony? It had to be Sonia or her husband. The angle only made sense from Sonia's balcony. But Sonia glared at me, replying, What? Don't be absurd, lady. Lady? You got proof we did it? Make false accusations and I'll call the cops. Despite being a former gang member, her reliance on the police in such a situation seems second-rate to me. I have no proof, but the way the eggs are scattered, they could only come from your balcony. I tried to remain calm, but Sonia kept glaring and arguing back. Proof? That's weak. Hey, Tony, the lady next door is complaining. Hearing this, Tony joined in. Hey, just because you're Joshua's wife doesn't mean you'll get any special treatment. If Sonia was second-rate, Tony's words were no better. He might think he's intimidating, but to me, it's not frightening at all. I could feel my old self stirring, but I didn't want to revert to my past. So I played the role of a meek, unassuming woman and said quietly, Please, don't raise your voice. Inwardly, I wanted to deliver a roundhouse kick right then and there, to snap that foolish neck. But having reformed after meeting Joshua, I didn't want to throw away all my efforts for something like this. Seeing my reaction, they both burst into laughter in front of me. Aha! So, you're Joshua's wife? I thought you'd be something special, but you're just a dull woman. Weak. Tony was giving you too much credit. At the family dinner, you seemed like a real introvert. A kick alone won't suffice. I might need to dislocate a joint or two. Trying to control my rising anger, I was told, Go on, leave. And the door was closed on me. I stood there, staring at the closed door. I pondered telling Joshua, but knew that even if he spoke to Sonia, they'd just feign ignorance. It would only result in more harassment and frustration for me. So I decided against it. The next day, and the day following, the harassment from Sonia and her husband continued. It always began after Joshua left for work. Who dumped this garbage at our doorstep? It must be those two. As I was about to leave for work at the supermarket, the door got stuck halfway, blocked by a bag of garbage. I reluctantly took it to the disposal area and then headed to work. 5 hours later, I returned home to find, This is unbelievable! There was a cardboard box in front of the door, arranged like a table. On either side of the box, lit candles were placed, and in the center, a vase with flowers was set. On the door above, a photo of me, taken who knows when, was stuck. They were mocking me, as if I was deceased. Furious, I was about to kick the cardboard away, when Joshua called from behind. Nancy? Startled, I turned around to find Joshua, who had come home from work. You're an hour early. I got off work early today. What's all this? Joshua was also surprised at the sight in front of the door. We quickly cleaned up the cardboard and candles from the shared hallway and went inside. There, I told Joshua everything that had happened. So, it's likely Sonia and her husband? But we don't have any proof, so even if we confront them, they'll just deny it. After a moment of thought, Joshua had an idea. Let's buy cameras, one for the balcony and one for the entrance, especially hidden well at the entrance. I agreed with Joshua's suggestion. There was a limit to how much more we could endure. We immediately purchased cameras online. We had the cameras delivered to Joshua's workplace to avoid suspicion. For now, we'll just have to endure until the cameras arrive. Then we can retaliate with evidence. Understood. So, I bore the harassment from Sonia's house for the next couple of days. For most people, endurance means being unable to fight back due to lack of strength or fear. But for me, it was different. I was holding back the urge to retaliate. In a world where using force was permissible, I would have already pulverized those two. Having the ability but not being able to use it was incredibly frustrating. 3 days later, Joshua came home with the cameras. Any trouble since? The usual. Today, they even threw a fish head onto the balcony. Let's set up the cameras right away. Put one behind the air conditioning unit on the balcony, aiming at Sonia's balcony. We'll hide another near the fire extinguisher, by the entrance. The day after installing the cameras, Sonia's antics started again as Joshua left for work. I monitored everything through a recording app. Sure enough, the two of them started their antics. I silently observed and left for work when it was time. 2 hours into my shift at the supermarket, Sonia lined up at my register. Well, well, if it isn't my sister-in-law. I silently scanned the items. It was clear from Sonia's tone she knew it was me, her demeanor dripping with condescension. Aren't you a bit cold for a cashier? Shouldn't you be more hospitable? Come on, give me a discount on this. Other customers were lined up behind Sonia, watching our interaction with concerned expressions. Hey, I'm not a scarecrow, you know. A middle-aged man in line spoke up to Sonia. Hey, can't you see she's uncomfortable? Sonia whirled around, glaring fiercely. Shut up! It's none of your business! The man seemed completely deflated by Sonia, who suddenly yelled at him. The man shrank back and left the line. I then addressed Sonia for the first time. Ma'am, if you continue to behave inappropriately, I'll have to call security. I spoke in a calm but icy tone. Perhaps mindful of the others watching, Sonia retorted, Jeez, it's just a joke. Ugh, so disappointing. And left the store, abandoning her items halfway through the transaction. The other customers stared in astonishment. My anger was just about to boil over. When I returned home after work, there was a notice on the door. The note on the door read, Useless cashier. That's it. I can't take it anymore. I ripped off the note in frustration and waited anxiously for Joshua to return. After Joshua got home, we reviewed the footage from the cameras. It clearly recorded Sonia and her husband's misdeeds. Now we can fight back. Alright, let's go now. Anger filled Joshua's eyes. When we rang Sonia's doorbell, Tony answered. You two again? What do you want this time? Sonia appeared behind him. What do you want, Joshua? The two of them asked lazily. We finally began our counterattack. You two? As I started to speak, Joshua stopped me and stepped forward. Nancy, let me handle this. Sonia and you, Tony. If you harass us any further, it won't end well for you. Joshua's voice was low and menacing. Tony retorted, What? You want to fight? Do you even have proof we did anything? Making baseless accusations like before. Before Tony could finish, Joshua started playing the video saved in the recording app. What? This is our video, capturing your wrongdoings. We had to install cameras because your harassment was too much. This silenced the usually talkative pair. Tony? Sonia, showing a hint of panic, turned to Tony. Tony, frowning deeply, glared back at us. Damn it! You got us this time. The trouble started from your end, remember? I said with a serious face. Tony retorted, So we settle this with force, huh? Wait there, Joshua. I'm calling someone. Call whoever you want. We'll be ready. Joshua stood firm, undeterred. As the situation escalated, Tony desperately pleaded into the phone. William, I need backup, now. His tone was completely different from the bravado he showed us, repeatedly begging for help. After hanging up, he turned back to us. Get ready, William, the most notorious guy around here, is on his way. He smirked at us, convinced of his imminent victory, but relying on someone else's strength showed his true cowardice. Why don't you confront us directly? Keep talking. I know your strength well. I called a special guest this time to ensure you both feel real terror. What a pitiful sight it was. No matter how much they threatened, neither Joshua nor I felt any fear. You must be too scared to even speak. The quiet and meek Nancy, right? Sonia taunted me with a condescending tone. 5 minutes later, the much bragged about William arrived. However, he looked surprised when he saw us. "William, over here." "Long time no see, William." Sonia and Tony were visibly excited, having high expectations of him. But their expectations were quickly shattered. "What's going on here?" "Indeed, long time no see, Will." My calling him Will left Sonia and Tony with puzzled expressions. Joshua also greeted him. "It's been a while, Will." The couple looked even more confused by this interaction. Confused, Tony asked, "What's this? How do you know William?" As Tony spoke with sweat on his forehead, Will looked back and forth between us. I simply said to him, "Well, let's not do this, okay?" Hearing this, an angry Tony retorted, "Don't joke around! William, please, do something! Please!" Sonia and Tony were frantic, unable to grasp the situation. But then Will addressed them. "Hey, don't tell me you mess with Nancy." His question left the couple momentarily stunned. "So what if we did?" Tony answered hesitantly. Furious, Will shouted, "Idiots! Don't you know who you're messing with?" His rebuke left them standing frozen. They clearly had no idea what was going on. Seeing this, I turned to Joshua and said, "Hey, Joshua, can I revert to my old self from 15 years ago, just for now?" Instead of Joshua, it was Will who turned and responded. Nancy, please, don't! If you do something to them, it might not end up more than just an injury." "What? You're giving me orders now, Will?" No, I didn't mean it like that." Being the special guest they called for help, now humbly apologizing to me, Sonia and Tony were bewildered. "What's happening here?" Their faces turned pale as Will spoke. "Do you two know about BBN?" "Well, yes, it's famous. It stands for Black Butterfly Nancy, right? The nickname of the former leader of a ladies' group." "That's right, and this lady here is Nancy herself." "No way. Really?" "What?" Both lost their bravado in an instant. Continuing, Will said, "Back then, I led another delinquent group, but we were decimated by Nancy's group. She could take down 30 people by herself." Sonia and Tony now looked at me fearfully. It made sense. They'd been harassing someone who they thought was inferior, only to find out she was the leader of a ladies' group they themselves had once belonged to. I didn't know. Nancy is practically a legend. We joined the group 6 months after you left. As Sonia said, she and Tony had joined the group half a year after I had left. Will had been scouted by me and stayed in the group even after my departure, and looking after Sonia and Tony as their senior. He left the group just before it was decimated by a rival group. By that time, Tony had taken over as the leader, and was the last leader before its downfall. Before you ruined it, it was an invincible group. You can't match Nancy. How could this? Tony was increasingly cornered and distressed by Will. "Well, the group that took you down is now the strongest in New York State. But if Nancy was still active, she would still be the strongest." Hearing this, Sonia and Tony collapsed, their spirits broken. Seeing this, Will turned to me and apologized. "Please forgive them for my sake." Watching Will apologize, Sonia and Tony had completely lost their will to fight. They never imagined their call for help would backfire this way. "All right, but you'll have to settle your dues properly." I glared at the two of them and said, "Ah!" They let out a short scream. "For 1 month, you'll clean this apartment and our balcony that you dirtied. If you skip even 1 day, I won't be so forgiving next time." Okay. Sonia, completely intimidated, managed to stutter out her agreement. Tony, unable to speak, just kept nodding frantically. Watching them, Will commented, "No one can really stand up to Nancy." Hearing this, the silent Joshua finally spoke. But I hate delinquents. If Nancy hadn't reformed, I wouldn't be here. Looking down a bit, Joshua said softly, and I peered up at him. Don't worry, I won't show that side of me again. Will burst into laughter at this scene, and we all ended up laughing together. Will and Joshua knew each other because the three of us had met after I left the group. We bumped into Will while on a date and had tea together. Well, now that's settled, why don't you come over for dinner, Will? We three left Sonia and Tony slumped by the entrance and headed to our apartment. Before entering, Joshua added, Sonia, you're my sister, so I'll let this slide just this once, but there won't be a next time. Watching him, I wondered if he too was hiding the same fighting spirit as us. From that day, the harassment from Sonia and her husband completely stopped. As promised, they continued cleaning our balcony and the common areas of the apartment. Though just delinquents doing chores, other residents sometimes looked at them curiously, but that soon stopped. After a month, Sonia and her husband left the apartment without a word. Even Joshua, their blood relative, didn't know where they went. They probably left, feeling awkward about staying in the same place. We had no reason to get involved further, and thought they finally made a wise decision. Finally, we had our peaceful life back. Though neighborhood troubles are common, I never thought I'd be directly involved. At least it was resolved amicably. I have a past I'd rather keep hidden. Joshua has kept it secret all this time. I'm not ashamed of all my past, but I have reflected on my mistakes. I just want to cherish my life with Joshua now, and I hope to live without ever showing my true nature to anyone again. That's all I'm thinking about now.